and sea floor over the long sunburnt ridge of the world. I bid the wind secure, I bid them cry to you, night and morning, on you loved once.
She was one of these absolutely self-commanded, absolutely fabulous is the only word for her, people that you just were awed by at first and then very quickly came to love. And she could talk to anybody about anything, and especially someone who clearly cared about music and loved it.
My joys will
Her music must be heard just like we hear anybody, Vaughan Williams, Britten, Schubert, Schumann, Clara Schumann. You know, she's an absolute mainstay, A-class composer. I think her music is fabulous and absolutely must be seen and heard as much as possible.
The twilight comes, the sun dips down and sets.
We're putting together the complete vocal works of Rebecca Clarke. We're recording all the songs that we know of that she's written, including a large proportion of which have never been recorded before, have never been published, which is very exciting.
Does the road wind uphill all the way? Yes, to the very end.
I knew of her because of the viola sonata. I was a violist when I was a kid. And I'm a chamber music nerd. So I knew of her and I knew that she had written some songs. I was curious and I wanted to learn more. So Google searches basically led me to Chris Johnson, who kind of opened this world up for me.
Nick and I have sort of been match-made by Chris Johnson, Rebecca Clarke's great-nephew. Nick and I separately became involved in her music through our separate organisations, which have done projects which seek to champion women composers, which led us to be contacting Chris to try and get hold of some of this music. And recently found out from Chris that he had these new scores that have never been published and never been recorded. I think both of us had a similar idea, well, these need to be recorded then.
I am lucky enough to be Rebecca Clarke's great-nephew by marriage. I've been the owner of her rights and a great many of her manuscripts and most of her papers since 1982, 3 years after she died. And I've been shepherding and curating her music and her writings ever since. I had known about her in advance because my wife, when she was my wife-to-be, had spoken of her very fondly and at length, and we all shared a great interest in music, so she was particularly fascinating to me. Clarke and I corresponded a little bit, mostly about music. She was beginning to field a lot of inquiries from musicologists and archivists and librarians and people who were building the early databases about women composers, and she was a very old woman. She had a hard time with the technological forms and whatnot. So she increasingly relied on me for help and mediation and a certain amount of legwork with that kind of thing. And I increasingly realized the extent of her work and a little bit of the depth of it. And I thought, well, gee, this really needs to get organized because she's already 80-something. She's not going to go on forever. And this is clearly becoming an important topic. And it needs to be set in order, and she needs to contribute to that while she's still around to tell us what's what. and to guide us and to answer questions, and also to say what she wanted. So that led to a comprehensive organization, a thematic catalog, and then after she died, her will simply stipulated that everything be divided evenly among her heirs, and no specific provision was made for the music, but it turned out nobody in the family was really interested or wanted to be bothered with it. So the idea emerged, since I had done all that work and in practical fact knew more about her music than anybody on earth at that point, the happy thought was had that I should have the music assigned to me and the underlying physical materials given to me. So in 1982, it all came to me, and I've been doing my best with it ever since.
When I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches.
She has such a unique sound world and sort of style. You can absolutely tell her talents as a musician and player.
She was instantly successful as a viola player, hugely influential, especially in the United States. And as a composer, she wrote a lot of the songs that are included in this project. And especially she wrote a great deal of music for viola and piano, or viola and cello, for her own immediate use in her own concert activity. So there was a great deal of composition right off the bat. Little of it was published in the first decade, but a great deal of it was played very successfully and increasingly famously.
Down into the sea together, and the moon made a track on the sea, and they walked down.
When the opportunity arose to enter an international competition for a viola sonata or suite, an extended concert work, she decided she'd give it a crack. It was an anonymous competition. Theoretically, the judges had no idea who any of the entrants were. It was boiled down from 72 or 73 entries from around the world to 10, and then finally to 2. And the way the competition was set up, they had the extreme unwisdom to have an even-numbered jury, and they split 3 and 3, and they deadlocked repeatedly. And finally, they called in Mrs. Coolidge, who was the founder of the festival, who was associated with the competition, said, "You have to break the tie." And Mrs. Coolidge favored the work, which turned out to be the suite by Ernest Bloch. And the rules called for all the other entries to be sent back in perfect anonymity. But the judges were so stuck on this other piece that they said, no, we have to bend the rules. We have to know who that was by. Apparently, they had suspected that it was by Ravel. They thought, oh, Ravel's come back from the trenches and he's writing again. This was in 1919. He's writing again, so this is clearly by him. We're going to have a big headline here. Isn't this interesting? And they opened it up, and it turned out to be not by a Frenchman, but by an English woman. And not only that, by a young English woman who was previously only known for her songs and some interesting small viola solos. So, big surprise, worldwide sensation. There was an enormous outcry, and she became quite famous overnight. Stayed that way for a good long time. She steadily rose in the ranks and became one of the most highly regarded composers, certainly in Britain. And she was widely known and much appreciated in the United States as well.
Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and and silver light, the blue and the deep and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light.
The thought process with which she's writing, there's almost never a question, ultimately, about how to turn a corner. She's so clear in the way she writes, and everything just kind of makes sense in a very special and very unique way that I think speaks to the greatest composers. I mean, that's what makes the greatest composers great, is that their music is not only beautiful and astounding and multi-layered, but also intuitive. And she has that in spades.
She just covers every kind of mood you can imagine, really. But you always, to me, it's very, very obviously Rebecca Clarke. She's got her own voice, her own sound, her own harmonic language. You're always having to kind of think, okay, so what world are we in now? What colours, what articulation, what sounds am I trying to create? And so it very much keeps you on your toes.
She was a committed modernist in her way. She wrote concise. She wrote sparely. She was free to write what she wanted, and that's what we've got. And now with the vocal music, we can see the whole panoply of it, and it's everywhere. It's all over the map. Simple, sort of Elizabethan knockoff things, simplest little lullabies in the world, great big long declamatory psalm settings right out of the synagogue, folk dramas like The Seal Man, shattering narratives like Benori, and always another thing that's very important here is choice of text. She was incredibly original and really quite sophisticated and daring.
There's so many different ideas and things that she has and ways of expressing text and how she sets the piano parts and all the different kind of tools that she uses to word paint.
She loved the deep bass, absolutely loved it. It's a thumbprint of her work. But also constantly she's going back and forth without the middle. And this is the mark of somebody who's thinking from the inside out. She changed from the violin to the viola as a composition student because her teacher, the great Sir Charles Stanford, said, join the college orchestra and shift down to the viola, because then you're right in the middle of the sound, and as a composer, you can hear how it's all done. The songs show that she was already doing that with the songs, because you've got the piano mostly out around here, which leaves a nice little open envelope for the voice. She never fights with the voice or with the viola or with whatever instrument she's featuring at any point. And she's remarkably successful at that. And it's especially valuable with the songs. It's one of the things that makes them so compelling and so communicative and so clear that you often don't need a printed text in order to follow what's going on.
She's from this school of composers, English song composers, who are our absolute bread and butter. When you are studying, when you're performing English song, you think of these kings, Vaughan Williams, Gurney, Howells, Roger Quilter. This is our staple diet when we're studying and performing English song. And she's from right in the middle of that, literally. She was with them at the Royal College, and her music is easily as good and very similar in many ways, but very much her own. And several women of that same gang, Elizabeth McConkie, Grace Jones, Muriel Herbert, they were all part of this gang, and yet these women have somehow been wiped out of that history book, and we're left with these fabulous pillars of English song, Vaughan Williams and Gurney and all of them, but there's no reason why Rebecca Clarke and the other women I mentioned shouldn't be alongside these in our core canon.
That period of English music is so beautiful. And you hear all of those influences on her. At the same time, there is something that is so singular about the way she writes. And so her sound world is truly unique.
There are so many flashes of modernist inspiration that don't sound like Vaughan Williams and that sound assured. Sometimes those flashes of inspiration are maybe French-leaning. I'm thinking particularly of some of the harmonies of The Seal Man, but some of the textures of that too, that go beyond something Vaughan Williams might have written and into a different part of the century, as it were.
You think of someone like Benjamin Britten, who kind of comes out of the same time period a bit, and he sounds so different from all of those composers, and we have this narrative that he was pushing in a complete, he changed the course of English music history. And I listen to somebody like Rebecca Clarke and I study this music and I sort of think, he didn't do that alone. She was clearly going in her own sophisticated, unique, singular directions.
When fishes flew and forests walked and figs grew upon thorn, some moment when the moon was blood, then surely I was born.
When I was studying, I did a vast amount of song repertoire, a huge amount of English song, never by a woman.
It's absolutely shocking and appalling that it's only in the past maybe a decade that she's really there on the concert platform regularly, and still not regularly enough. There's still too many people that don't know her name. It still absolutely shocks me that she had to write music under a pseudonym, under a male pseudonym.
The famous Anthony Trent episode. She wrote under a pseudonym once, and there's a little bit of a story to it. It was her New York concert debut. And she had decided to feature a number of those viola solos. She looked at the preliminary draft of the flyer and the advertising and the program and saw her own name there as a performer and a composer a truly laughable number of times. I mean, it was a Rebecca Clarke festival with a few other names like Brahms thrown in. And she thought, this just looks ridiculous. It looks like a self-benefit. I have to do something about it. So she put two pieces together with a single credit to her. And the third piece that she was doing, a glorious viola solo called Morpheus, she passed off as the work of one Anthony Trent, just simply because she didn't want to repeat her own name. I think also she might have thought this was in a style that she was no longer using. It's much more romantic and tuneful and songful and themey and atmospheric and whatnot than the very modernist things that she put under her own name. She later said that in the reviews, which were glittering, the critics paid much more attention to the piece by Anthony Trent than they did by the piece by Rebecca Clarke. And that misled a lot of people into thinking that there was some kind of anti-woman thing at work here. It's a reasonable conclusion. It turns out to be wholly unjustified because these days, with everything digitized, we can actually go back and recover all the reviews. And guess what? They were all very positive about the pieces that were credited to Rebecca Clarke. If they noticed Morpheus by supposedly Anthony Trent, They either gave it the back of the hand or a polite ho-hum, or they simply noted that it had been performed, and that was it. So out of the whole lot of them, Clarke got all the good notices, Trent got all the not-so-good notices, and they both got an equal number of neutral things in between. So why she told the story that way, I have no idea. Unfortunately, it just simply wasn't true. It didn't happen that way. But she never corrected the impression. So it's a great mystery. People tended to conclude, oh, she had been written out of history. Well, no, actually she hadn't. The historical documents were all there. The articles in the reference volumes were all there in umpteen different languages around the world. It's just that people weren't used to looking, and she didn't need to be discovered, and she certainly didn't need to be rescued. She just needed a little re-promotion. The question often arises, was this because she was a woman? I think not. I have been able to do enough research now, especially in media, with newspaper coverage, reviews, advertising, which is crucially important for anybody who's in the public eye, and especially for performers. That really is where you see what's done and where, and how and who. And no, she just sort of drifted down a little bit from the big venues in the big metropolitan centers with the glamour performers attached to it, but she was still perking along in music clubs, in university and conservatory programs, even in amateur circles as well. The music was there. I have her fan mail from the period. I can tell you who these people were, and they were really committed to Rebecca Clarke. So I think it was purely a matter of general fashion. Even Ravel, people completely forgot about all those cutting-edge things that he wrote before World War I, like the Sonata for Violin and Cello, which is one of the most hair-raisingly modern things in the whole repertoire. It was as if it had never been written. And of course, a lot of this follows technology. So after the big 12-tone wave, we had the big long playing wave, and then we had the big stereo wave. So there's a great premium on things with mass and color. So Ravel, for example, is reduced to a giant stereo spectacular, and we get a lot of Ravel and Rhapsody Espagnole, and people think, oh, that's all he ever did. They completely lose the thread. Oh, he was one of the great pioneering modernists of the 20th century before the war. Similarly with Clarke, she wasn't being talked about, but then nobody else in her cohort was either.
Es stand ein Baum in einem Zaubergarten, von 1000 Blüten duftete sein Bild, und einer leuchtete vor allen mild, und einer leuchtete vor allen mild. Es stand ein Baum in einem Zaubergarten, und aus den 1000 pflückte ich die eine, sie war noch schöner mir in meinen Händen.
There is a lot of pressure on women composers or anybody who's been minoritized to be absolutely perfect in every way, in every single song, every piece of music, because otherwise it's very easy to dismiss them and their entire minority group that they are a part of, which is very unfair. There are plenty of rubbish songs by our favorite male composers, but we overlook that because there are so many great ones. Whereas I think for women, if there are a few not so great ones, then it's very easy to quickly go, oh, women composers. And I think that's hard for women, as a hard way to judge women composers.
Women have been writing music for a really long time, and once you look at it, you realize it's just as good as anything else that was being written at the time. If that's the case, I don't understand why there's not more music being programmed by women.
There are many other women like her. And I want us to get to the point where audiences aren't like, oh, we've got a female composer on the programme. Oh, that'll be interesting. I just want us to get beyond that and people to see composers that they know and they love the music, and not make this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not discrepancy, this, it be such a noticeable thing that there's a woman there. That it's just, that's normal, that's normality. And women compose fantastic music, and men compose fantastic music. And it's not a surprise to people anymore that a woman can write good music. I think we're being very slow to move on from this, astonishing discovery.
The fact that it includes those 24 or so early pieces that she wrote as an uninstructed amateur, feeling her own way into composition. She tended to poo-poo that whole group of pieces and actually withheld them. When I was doing that catalog that I mentioned earlier, she was adamant on the point. She did not want those things included. And I had to stand her down and say, no. This is the record for the ages. You cannot do a thematic catalog and have it be selective or incomplete. It's everything or it's nothing. And certainly if you've got it on hand, which she had with this gaggle of manuscripts, it has to go in. But once we sat down to do it, she kind of got into it, and actually she revised a couple of them. In some ways, you can always tell by the darkness of the pencil in these manuscripts whether it's an old revision that's faded or one from 1976 when we were doing the catalog. And she actually tinkered with some of her earliest things even. I saw her do it one time. She'd open something up and go, oh, parallel fifths, wait. She'd stop and fix it on the spot. But she remained ambivalent about it, I think because she didn't want to be known by works that she felt didn't represent her highest standard. But she did go along with it. I have tended over the years not to withhold those pieces, but I've been perhaps a little too honest with people as I saw it, telling this story and saying, look, you're welcome to look at these things, you're welcome to consider them for study and performance, but I don't vouch for them because she didn't, and because she went to such great lengths to keep them out of public view. Increasingly, performers got interested, and this actually has been the whole dynamic of Clarke's initial career and then of her coming back after the big dip in popularity. It wasn't so much the scholars that drove it, it was overwhelmingly the performers, like the people involved in this project. So, after you've done all the published Rebecca Clarke and you want to do more, there was all this other stuff, and guess what? It turned out to be way better on the whole than she allowed.
Away, delights, go seek some other dwelling, for I must die. Farewell, false love, thy tongue is ever telling lie after lie. Forever let me rest now from thy smart. Alas, for pity, go and fire their hearts that have been hard to thee. Mine was not so.
I think a lot of people choose music at sight. They'll look at the first page of something and think, do I think this is something that's worth including in my repertoire? And they might look at it and think, it doesn't look like much on the page, probably not. And sometimes you can take a piece of music that's got something that isn't immediately apparent, and a good performance can maybe find something, can tap into something, and persuade someone that a piece is worth investigating. And I know that because I've found that of many pieces of music that I've taken a risk with and thought, I'm not so sure about this, and suddenly comes alive in front of an audience, and members come up to me afterwards and say, I loved that song by that composer or whatever, that I hadn't expected. So that is why I think it's worth investigating someone's work, just going through and seeing what's there. You never know where the gems are going to be.
God made a tree, man felled it, and with craft and cunning fashioned it crosswise. God hung on it.
What the whole project and the completeness of it means that now, finally, we can see a composer who I firmly believe was one of the most significant musical figures of the 20th century. In her way, she wrote what she wanted, when she wanted, how she wanted, and that was it. She wrote it completely, and it was all there. And by God, it speaks. It works. It speaks for itself. And now we can see it from first to last. Every last bit of it. And we can begin to assess the whole range of what she was capable of. And it's really astounding. It's an overwhelming thing to get everything from the very simple first steps to the almost immediately highly sophisticated, very complex, very subtle, very harmonically involved pieces that she comes out with almost right off the bat. And again, before she had any instruction in composition, just all out of her own spirit and her own musical imagination. It's astounding. And then the things she comes forth with later on that just grow and grow and grow in power until you start to get the great monuments like the Seal Man.
Es klagt im Dunkeln irgendwo, ich möchte wissen, was es ist. Der Wind klagt wohl die Nacht an, der Wind klagt aber nicht so nah. Der Wind klagt immer in der Nacht in meinen Ohren, klagt mein Blut wohl.
I've been thrilled to discover so much new repertoire. I think my job as somebody who has taken upon herself to champion women composers, the last thing I want to do is to be putting out repertoire that is substandard and risking damaging the reputation of women composers further. So you don't want to be just putting stuff out because it hasn't been recorded or because nobody knows it and you're going to be the first one to record it. That won't necessarily help women composers' cause. But the thrill for me with this is I haven't so far heard or studied one song that I thought was a weak link. I think they're all absolute bangers.
I think people will love this music, especially if you love British music. I would be really curious to know what she would have continued to write had she continued to write throughout the rest of her life.
The works absolutely stand forth effortlessly and completely. And what's in there, even some of the earliest things, are, well, it was hard to sit in the control room and not cry repeatedly because, I've been at this now for 40-something years, and hearing these things fully realized by people who are absolutely committed even to the least of them is simply an overwhelming experience. I've been pushing this cart around for 40-something years now, 50 if you count the years I worked with her. That's a long time. That's 2/3 of my life. I felt so deeply privileged to have known her in the first place at all, and to have had the opportunity to work with her even at my sort of low mechanical recording level during her lifetime. She was a wonderful person. I adored her. She always made you feel better than you were. And I feel that I owe her a lifetime debt. And I hope I've paid off some of it.
Come sleep, and with thy sweet deceiving,
It realizes who she was and shows why that matters in an instantly accessible way to anybody who will take the time to listen to it. And I think the individual parts, and certainly the totality of it, are so enlivening, are so enriching, are so valuable in what they show us about human existence, human life, human sensibility, and the power of the imagination. It's a gift to the world. It's a great enterprise. It's a noble enterprise. It's a magnificent body of work. Listen to it. It'll make you better.